So you just locked yourself in a PlayStation 5, or maybe you've had a PS5 since drop and you're wondering, Kevin, what are some good titles, good experiences to be had on this console? I'm not really dressed for the occasion. Whoa. Nice. A little bit more. There it is right there. I'm going to go over the awesome must-play experiences I've enjoyed over the last 6 months with my PlayStation 5. Some of these are available on both PS4 and PS5. Some of these are even boosted PS4 titles, and some of them are actually PS5 exclusives. Grab your DualSense controller, boys, and let's get into this thing. Starting the list out, Stallions, this game is free, already pre-installed on the PlayStation 5, and that is, of course, Astros Playroom, which is a very, very cute 3D platforming game designed by Sony Interactive and Japanese studio Asobi to specifically show off the new features of the PlayStation 5, specifically the DualSense controller. It is a very short game. You can beat this thing head to tail, tip to tits in about 3 hours, but it is definitively the first experience you should play on the PS5 to get acquainted with your DualSense controller. Not to mention, if you are a long-term Sony fan, you will love the little Easter eggs in there, all the collectible artifacts, our previous PlayStation consoles and gear. And coolest of all, the 4 game worlds are split up into 4 major sectors that are different components inside of a PlayStation 5, such as the SSD Speedway and the GPU Jungle. If that's not awesome, I don't know what is. Now, I do personally hope that they make this a full-length game in the near future. I do have a full comprehensive review of this game that will be linked in the description below. Next up is going to be SpiderMan Miles Morales, another launch title, and I do strongly recommend that you pick up the deluxe version, as it does include a PS5 boosted version of the PS4 game SpiderMan, which if you have not played, the PS5 is definitively the place to try this game out to wet your beak, as it is at 60 frames per second with ray tracing on. It does make partial use of the adaptive triggers on the DualSense, but really nothing to write home about there. But what is amazing is web slinging through the city at a locked 60 frames per second with insane draw distance, instantaneous load times, and a little taste of ray tracing. If you got the disc version of the PlayStation 5, which I strongly hope that you did, you can pick this game up at GameStop relatively cheap now. That is the deluxe version that includes both games. Turn that baby onto performance RT visual mode, turn off film grain and chromatic aberration, and have a great time. Again, I do have a full-length detailed review of Spider-Man as well as Miles Morales on the PlayStation 5, linked in the description below. Next up is Demon's Souls, another PS5 exclusive launch title. It is getting ported over to the PS4 now, and it is a remake of the original PlayStation 3 title that launched in 2009. This game has been received by the gaming community incredibly well, with fluid gameplay that is true to the original. However, they did make some tweaks that are very welcome. For example, in the original, healing grasses have no weight, so players could potentially carry hundreds of them. In the remake, these healing items now have a weight associated with them, so the amount the player can carry is significantly lessened. They also added a new feature called Fractured World, which is a mirror mode that reverses the layout of environments. They also added a photo mode, which looks muy caliente. And the remake now includes different difficulty levels, which I'm sure any Dark Souls game player will tell you is a good thing. Character creation feature has also been bumped up with a ton more customization. And this game received 5 out of 5s and 9 out of 10s for a reason. It's good. Next up is going to be Sackboy: A Big Adventure, and unlike the rest of the games on this list, this is a could pass on it, but still a very good experience, especially if you have a lot of friends or family members that still have the PS4, as you can co-op PS4 with PS5. Now, this is another 3D platformer, very cute and charming, very similar to Astros Playroom, but not quite as good. This is a full-length game, however, so you will invest more time into it. And if you are a fan of the universe of Little Big Planet, you will like this. However, they did away with the entire creative aspect of Little Big Planet, which in my opinion was basically what the whole game was about. This does have a completely linear storyline. As Sackboy completes each stage, he unlocks a new one to progress. All levels contain collectible objects called Dreamer Orbs, which must be collected in order to progress to the end of the game. One of the things that is quite enjoyable is Sackboy's moveset is now greatly expanded from previous entries in the franchise, and players can now slap at will, roll around, nosedive, pick up objects, flutter, jump, just to name a few. So I can't really label this title as a must-play experience on the PlayStation 5. However, it did make the list because I personally enjoyed it, as I did couch co-op, and I did also play over the interwebs with a lot of my PS4 brothers. Next up is going to be Returnal. This game is incredibly fun, but incredibly frustrating. Why? Because there is no save game states. Well, technically there's 6 each time you begin a new node or sector, but if you die, you are starting over again. It is a roguelike, and it is actually my first experience with that genre of game. It is a third-person Bulletstorm shooter roguelike video game developed by House Marquee and published by Sony Interactive, so it is a first-party title. It is exclusive to the PlayStation 5, and that is for a reason. This game is completely designed for the PlayStation 5. It runs incredibly smooth and looks incredibly beautiful, despite the fact that behind the scenes it actually does dip down in frame rate and resolution. It's very, very not noticeable. What is noticeable is the very fluid, smooth gameplay, as it is a very fast-paced shooter with a pretty interesting storyline as you are explorer Celine Vasos, who's attempting to land on a planet of Atropos to investigate what she dubs as the White Shadow Signal, which somehow seems to be familiar to her. Why? Because she's already experienced it and she's died several times before, but she keeps coming back at her ship. Now, while it is not mandatory for this game as well as the next game on the list, I strongly would recommend getting a premium paddle controller. This HexGaming is a good option if you only need 2 paddles, and this aim controller is the definitive controller if you need 4 paddles. Technically, it's the only 4 paddle controller on the market in the DualSense flavor. Now, I did forget to mention I do have exclusive coupon codes for both the AIM and HexGaming controllers here to knock off a little bit of money at checkout. And the reason for this is in Returnal, things get so hectic, you really don't have time to be taking your finger off the right analog stick and touching the face buttons to dive and jump and reload and use your abilities. You pretty much need to be aiming and maneuvering at all times. So that is why I recommend a paddle controller for this game. And the next one falls into this camp as well. And that is, of course, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Now, I beat this game start to finish 3 separate times on different difficulty and challenge modes, as well as by myself and then with my girlfriend. And we greatly enjoyed this game. This is probably one of my favorite console experiences ever. Not just on this console, but literally over about 26, 27 years of playing video games. That math seems to make sense. I'm 32. I obviously wasn't gaming when I came out of the womb. We'll say I started at 5. This game is so damned good. I do have a full review of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart linked in the description below. This is a PlayStation 5 exclusive third-party shooter developed by Insomniac and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It is the 16th installment in the Ratchet and Clank series, with the game serving as a direct follow-up to Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus, as well as the 2016 Ratchet and Clank reboot. I could spend a lot of time talking about this game, but I'm simply not going to do it, but I will cover the key points. First of all, graphically, this game is beautiful. A lot of people have labeled it as the most beautiful game they've ever seen. It's kind of hard to label it with that considering the graphic style. This is not a realistic simulation or anything like that. It's a cartoony Pixar-like 3D platformer, so it's really hard to be like, yeah, Lilo and Stitch is the most realistic game I've ever seen. But it does look amazing with the ray tracing effects. Also, the gameplay is very, very fun. I wouldn't be able to play a game 3 times over back to back unless the story mode was really good. And that leads into the next part here, is that it is constant action that never gets stale or stagnant. From the opening cutscene to the end credits, it is constantly moving forward with good pacing, no slowdown in the third act, and most importantly, there is 0 load times. This is not an exaggeration or some kind of fluff or bluff. There is not a single load time. And I was thinking at first, maybe they hide it behind a cutscene or something. Nope, because you can skip through those too. Now, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of end game content once you beat the original story. I know I said I did beat it 3 times, but all you can do is a challenge mode, which lets you keep your progress of your guns and abilities. You can play on a harder difficulty, but there is no multiplayer mode, and you don't unlock any bonus content like new maps or DLC or anything like that. But if you own a PS5, you literally need to try this game, as it is absolutely amazing. And again, I would recommend picking up a paddle controller for this game, as it is a shooter and it will definitely help you out, especially if you are playing on hard mode, which I did beat it on. Enemies get a little bit more spicy. They don't use extra abilities or anything, but they can receive more damage and they pay it out twice as hard. Next up is going to be Horizon Forbidden West. Just kidding, that's not out yet, but that's going to be an amazing game, and I'm sure that will make the list as well. Next up is going to be Gran Turismo 7. Okay, that's been delayed. Never mind. Next up is going to be Godfall. I'm just kidding. Don't do it to yourself. No need to buy that game. The remainder of the games on this list are going to be PS4 games that are now boosted up with increased performance for the PS5. I will have an article sourced or cited in the description below from pushsquare.com. Did I say puss? Pushsquare.com, going over all the previous PS4 games that had boosted performance. And that would be Days Gone. That game started a little bit rough, but just like No Man's By, which did indeed become No Man's Sky, they added a lot of patches and updates down the road that made Days Gone a phenomenal zombie survival game. And if you do not have a PC, as this does now, has been ported over to PC, if you only have a PS5, this is going to give you that next generation experience, as the game runs at 60 frames per second in dynamic 4K, where it used to be capped at 30 frames frames per second in checkerboard 4K on the PS4 Pro. Next up is going to be God of War, the PS4 version. That game runs phenomenally on the PS5. We're talking about 60 frames per second. 4K is where it used to be 1080p and hover around 40 to 50 frames per second in performance mode on that PS4 Pro. Next up is going to be Ghost of Tsushima, so even if you don't want to pony up the dough for the upgrade to the director's cut version, which I recommend you do as it does unlock some DLC, some extra gear, a new map, a new island on the map. But even if you're just playing the base version Ghost of Tsushima on the PS5, it is now at 60 frames per second 4K as opposed to a capped 30 on the PS4 Slim and Pro. But I would strongly recommend getting the director's cut as you do get more in-game gear and you're getting support for that DualSense controller. So haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, which do work really good in this game. Next up is going to be Ratchet and Clank, not Rift Apart, but the 2016 remake of the original, which now runs at 60 frames per second as compared to 30 on the PS4, and it looks so sweet. Not to mention this game was a free download on the PlayStation Network for quite some time. Next up, The Last of Us Part 2. Despite the fact that it does have a very, very controversial story with what happens to Joel, no spoilers here, you should probably already know by now. Other than that, it is a very, very good game. I had a couple of gripes or nitpicks during my initial review. However, I think they've changed those with some patches because I did not experience them as I played them again on the PlayStation 5. The gameplay was smooth and fluid at 60 frames per second, 1440 with HDR on, and my God, the game looks and plays beautifully. This is definitely a must-play experience on the PS5. Next up, if you're looking for something competitive, The Division 2 as well as Rocket League are now at 4K 60, and that might wet your whistle with a little bit of PvP and soccer ball slinging action. So these are my must-play experiences from the PlayStation 5. I have greatly enjoyed these games thus far. I'm sure I missed a couple awesome titles, so that is what you guys are here for. Drop in the comment section below your guys' favorite games on the PS5, even if they're PS4 remasters or maybe little indie third-party games that somebody designed in their basement. I will try any games you recommend to me, and if they are good in my book, they will make the next video. If you guys enjoyed the video, liking it will help it to get seen by more people, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Maybe PS5 owners that are looking for some new games. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, as well as tutorials getting you set up streaming and YouTubing, and I will see you tomorrow because I upload daily. Peace.